This is the Darren Paltrocast with Darren Paltrowitz.
Paltrocast.
I've been interviewing musicians, comedians, and all sorts of entertainers for almost 20 years. Joan Rivers, Flavor Flav, Paris Hilton, members of Guns N' Roses and the Eagles, and countless others. This show is about artists and why they do what they do.
Paltrocast.
Greetings from beautiful Long Beach, California. I've been here for the past few days to attend the Powwow Festival, thanks to the city of Long Beach, which really is an event worth attending if you're out in the LBC. Long Beach is not only home to the likes of Sublime and Snoop Dogg, but also my favorite airport in the world. My guests for this episode are three very interesting musicians: Scott Stapp, Bananarama singer Karen Dallin, and Todd Rundgren. First up is my chat with Todd Rundgren, who this fall will be part of the It Was 50 Years Ago Today tour with Mickey Dolenz, Jason Scheff, Joey Molland from Badfinger, and Christopher Cross. On that tour, you'll be hearing Todd play all of the Beatles' White Album, in addition to some of his own hits. Todd spoke with me about that tour and what else is coming up for him. That was my third time interviewing him, and he remains one of my favorite songwriters and producers of all time. Hey, Todd, how's it going there?
Pretty good.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time first and foremost. So I first want to ask you about It Was 50 Years Ago Today tour. How long ago did you find out that you would be doing the tour?
Well, I think we've been talking about it for, probably a year. Possibility has been there for a year, but the question of scheduling and stuff was a little more recent.
And I had the pleasure of seeing you on the A Walk Down Abbey Road tour. Is it the same team that produced this tour as that one?
From a production standpoint, yeah. That's probably the reason why me and Christopher Cross are both on it as well. That's of the history that we've had with that other production. So. And is it the same kind of format where you guys are definitely doing a key album but also playing your hits? Yeah, I think that, we got 5 guys, and between us, we each do 2 songs. So, 10 non-Beatles songs, and the rest of them all from the White Album. Well, I've had the pleasure of seeing you live a bunch of times over the years at Westbury Music Fair, and every time I've seen you, it's been a totally different show, a totally different format to the show, and it's always been really, really refreshing. And so with this tour coming up, are you itching at all to do another solo tour, or are you just really taking it one tour at a time? Well, I just got off the road from the Individualist tour, which was essentially a combination concert tour and book promotional tour. So normally I'd probably be looking at another at least 4 or 5 months of touring during the year, but as you mentioned, I've been out quite a lot of recent, and we figure it's time for me to take a little break, maybe until next summer. So for the rest of the year, the Abbey Road thing is the only thing that I'll be doing. And I won't be going out again until at least maybe May of next year. Now, when you say take a break, you recently put out that song, Blow Me with Red Peters. But does a break for you mean, hey, I'm not going to be making music, I'm not going in the studio, or does that mean that you're doing studio work in that downtime? It means I'll be working on other projects, but they won't involve me being on the road so much. I'm still doing collaborations with other artists, so that gives me a little bit more room to do that. I've got a sort of an art project, original work that's going to be mounted in Holland next year, so I've got that to work on. There is a number of other little side projects that require more or less of my attention that don't involve touring, so there's plenty for me to do besides being on the road. And as a matter of fact, when I'm on the road, I don't accomplish as much as I do when I'm at home. Going back to your recording career, I really like the White Knight album, and not just the music itself, but the concept where you were able to show that you can collaborate with all sorts of people from all sorts of genres of all ages. Was that a wonderful experience in retrospect, or was it just so much work with all the logistics and the collaborations? No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of something that I don't normally do, which is co-writing principally because I get very sort of insular when I get around to to composing an album of my own or something like that, and so I mostly go off someplace by myself. So the opportunity to collaborate remotely kind of, it allowed me to have that alone time, to live with the musical ideas, but it also kept me from being in like an echo chamber and only hearing my own ideas. So when I would get something from another artist, and it would be something, more or less unexpected, that would get me excited, because it would be a challenge to me to try and figure out, how do I finish this thing? Often the songs are something that the other artists had worked on for a while and then kind of gave up, and it never made it to completion. And so when I get a chance to listen to it, it suddenly becomes fresher, and I haven't had to go through the whole process of moving something from nothing up until that particular stage of evolution, let's say. So it's more like rather than what you would think of as McCartney and Lennon, where they sit down and bounce ideas off of each other. It's more like a relay race, where you do a leg and then you hand off the baton to somebody else, and then they do the next leg. And then sometimes, you hand the baton back for other sort of improvements or alterations or something like that. But it takes the pressure off of being in the same room with someone else and having to try and produce something within that kind of compressed time period.
I have to imagine you're the only artist to collaborate with both Trent Reznor and Hall & Oates, which says a lot about your versatility as an artist. So when you're collaborating with another artist, is it always that you start it and they continue it, or does it really just change on the situation?
No, it's completely different depending on the situation. I mean, sometimes I would get something that was, let's say, a whole song, but no melody or words over it. And then I might take that and rearrange it because, people just naturally hear things differently, and what someone might think is a chorus for a song, I might hear as a verse. And so I'll switch things around a little bit. Then there'll be some instances where I will record a song and just hand it off to somebody to make some maybe minor personal adjustments to, and then deliver a performance. So yeah, there's a variety of different ways. There was only one instance in which it was that kind of Lennon-McCartney interaction, and that was Tinfoil Hat with Donald Fagen, because we just happened to be here in Kauai at the same time. And I was finishing up White Night, and I had one song left over that I thought probably was not going to make it onto the record. And I sent it to him, and he started sending titles back to me, and then we had a couple of sit-downs to come up with some lyrics for the song, and then I recorded his vocal, and that was it. So that was the only song that was seemingly like a traditional songwriting collaboration in which two people were in the same room at the same time.
I had the pleasure of seeing your Utopia Live concert special on Access TV a couple of months ago. I know it was a DVD and a home video release beyond that. It's amazing to me how you remember so many songs in so many styles and all that. But are you creative beyond the musical realm, or does music get all of your creativity?
Well, when we do these larger shows, it involves me more as a kind of a, as a producer, not just a record producer, but, I usually am the one that come up with the videos for the shows as well. So I go back to video production, which I had a partnership with a company called New Tech back in the late 80s and the early 90s, which I did essentially all computer animations and generated about, maybe a half a dozen or so different things to my music as well back in the about 1990 or so, 89, 1990. So I go back to that when we do a presentation or a show that involves a lot of video. I wind up going back to my video production days as well. And as far as creativity in general, I usually have an opinion about what other people do, but I don't necessarily have the skill to do everything. I can tell when somebody's a good or a bad actor, but I have never really attempted to have a career as an actor or anything like that. So I would say, yeah, I have an artistic sensibility, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm able to create in anything that I want to.
But the tour that I saw of yours last, you were dancing on that tour. Did you have anything to do with the choreography?
No, that's usually Michelle. My wife does the choreography because she's actually a dancer. And I met her when she was dancing for the Tubes back in the early 80s. And she has also appeared in my tours as a background singer and as a dancer. And on the more recent shows, she doesn't dance anymore, but she does audition and choreograph any dancers that I do use.
And then I believe you and Michelle have worked together on the Tiki Bar of yours. Can you tell me more about that? I assume it's still in business?
It is in business. In fact, she just now left to go deal with some issue there. I'm not in the restaurant business. But Michelle, when we moved out here to Hawaii and we got into sort of serious family raising and stuff like that, her touring life more or less ended, and she wanted to have a place to perform. So originally what is now the Tiki Bar / restaurant was supposed to be more of a tiki club where she could every night go and or any night that she felt like it, go and perform for people. As it turned out, during the process of getting the whole place set up, there were zoning issues, competition from other businesses, who were afraid that she would hurt their business if she was able to do live music. So after all the work she went through, she opened the restaurant up, but was not allowed to have live music in the restaurant. Now, that may change at some point because a lot of stuff has changed. But this is always her idea. She did all the work. She found the investors. She runs the place. I do not have any interest, or never have had any interest, in being a restaurateur. So I like to disabuse people of the idea that I somehow had the idea to do this, or that I invested any work or significant finances or anything like that. And it's all her thing, really.
And in the terms of the Hawaii chapter of your life, are you intersected into the Shep Gordon Hawaii at all? Or are you entirely independent of that?
Well, we have, being that my wife is in the restaurant business, and being that I also have, even before that, had an association with with chefs and stuff, because chefs like music, and if you show some interest in what they're doing as well, you can develop, a relationship and suddenly find yourself eating really well at the chef's table a lot. So we do have a relationship with Shep. Well, I've had a relationship with Shep since the 70s because a very early version of Utopia toured briefly with Alice Cooper. So I knew Shep from back then when he was managing Alice. But Shep, who now manages mostly chefs, Shep is on Maui and we are on Kauai. And while we have friends who go back and forth, Shep rarely comes over here and we rarely go over there.
Got it. And the last time I interviewed you about 2 years ago, you were working on a jukebox musical. Is that still in the cards?
That's still in the cards. As a matter of fact, we just, this very week have had some discussions about it, productive discussions. While we don't have any sort of concrete projections on when it might be mounted, I think we're making progress on it, and possibly sometime within the next 3 to 6 months we may actually have something to talk about.
Interesting. So looking, back at everything, is there anything that you think that people have wrong about you in general? Because I think if you ask the average person who is Todd Rundgren, they'd go, that's a songwriter that's produced a bunch of hits for other people, had his own hits, he's been in a trillion projects that aren't necessarily connected to each other, but they're all Todd-like. Is there more that you wish people would know?
Well, I don't, sit around wishing people know things about me. Celebrity is a dangerous thing to dabble in. And I've always been kind of more of a private person. I don't really, when I'm off the road, desire, to have people recognize me on the street. I like to be able to go out and have a meal and be left alone, to just do that. But it's not the kind of thing that you can, turn on and off. When you gain a certain level of celebrity, you just have to learn how to live with it. But I don't actively pursue that aspect. If I did, I would be more like, some of these modern artists where you diversify into your own clothing line and your own perfume or something like that. And the only thing that I've ever pursued in that regard would be a boutique line of cannabis products.
And your ISP.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I'm fine with the level of celebrity that I have, and when I'm home, I don't sit around worrying that people forget about me or anything like that.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. So in closing, any last words for the kids?
Well, nothing. I mean, it's been a great year so far. Everybody came out in great numbers to see the Individualist tour, and it's generally considered to be a successful experiment. And I'm now happy to relax for a little while and let demand build up a bit. So I'll be out there a little bit. I'll be out there for the White Album thing, and I've got one or two other little gigs here and there. But for the most part, just tell everyone there's nothing wrong here, just except for the fact that I so rarely take this kind of time off. So.
Next up is my chat with Bananarama's Karen Dallin, who just released In Stereo, the first new Bananarama album in about a decade. Bananarama is still one of the best-selling pop groups of all time and still playing major festivals all over the world. Karen spoke with me about In Stereo, the group's early punk roots, and what keeps her going professionally. I first wanted to ask you about your new album, In Stereo, which is your first new album in a decade. How long had it been in the works for?
Probably 3 years. I'm not saying all the tracks were written back then, but we'd started writing. We kind of write all the time, but I don't know. I just feel we weren't in a place where we thought, oh, record companies are going to sign us and we can do this, because we've been around a long time. So we decided to just self-fund it and just see what happened. And fortunately, over here, it's been fantastic. It's our first top 30 album in a decade, and both singles have been played on BBC Radio 2. They've been like the most played records on the A-list, both singles, and it's just gone so well. We played Glastonbury, and yeah, it's just been really good. So hopefully you guys will like the album too.
I'm sure we'll like the album. But that's interesting that you said, and we didn't know which record companies would want to sign us, because few artists have sold more albums than Bananarama in the UK and arguably the world. I'm curious where that hesitation comes from.
Oh, I think it's just because we've been going for so long, and obviously, your relevance. There are young artists up and coming, and everything can be done in a bedroom now, and it's so different to how it was back in our day. And I don't think there was anybody falling over themselves to get to the new Bananarama album, which, well, maybe that's us just being, cynical. But, I just think you can do things in so many different ways. There's so many different ways of funding it. There's hedge funds and raising money, I forget what they're called, but you raise money through, the internet and all kinds of ways of putting albums out. But we just thought, we'll fund this ourselves. We love music. We've never stopped writing. And let's just see what happens. So I don't think there was any pressure, and we just went for it, and it just has been fantastic.
And you raise an interesting point there when you talk about how people can make music in their bedrooms, but not everybody realizes that you had a bit of a punk background, your connections to bands like the Specials and the Sex Pistols and all that. So looking back at that scene and seeing things come full circle and all that, are you still into the punk scene at all today, or do you just not look at punk the way it is today as being punk?
Well, Karen and I were, only little teenagers when punk happened, but it was a great time, that anarchy type thing, even though we had nothing really to rebel against. We loved the fashion and the music, and very much that do-it-yourself, not that you had to go to a stage school or be hugely trained. You could just get up when you wanted to write something and be creative. You could just get up and have a go. And I think we took that sort of punk ethic with us when we made our group in the 80s. And it was strange that Karen and I bumped into Paul Cook in a club, the drummer, and we didn't have anywhere to live. We were living in a hostel, and he did offer his where the Sex Pistols used to rehearse, and we had the office above, so we would come in from clubs and stick the guitars in and just thrash around the room. And it was a great beginning, and it wasn't manufactured in any way. It was very organic, and it was very much, Karen and I came from that sort of background and just went to clubs and loved music. So it was very authentic, I think, which it's not necessarily so much because there are so many reality shows now. I don't know how it is in America. I'm sure it's pretty much similar to here. But there's so many options of how you can become successful as a musician, whereas back in the day you had to tour. And for us, we were lucky it was the beginning of MTV, so, the videos were everywhere, so it made it slightly easier. But we absolutely love touring. Karen and I can't get enough of touring, and we just, we do it all the time now.
And yes, it is the same thing in the States. You hit the nail on the head right there. And speaking of touring, if the statistics and the research are correct that you've had 28 UK top 50 hits, when you're putting together a set list these days, is it pretty much all the hits and then one or two new songs, or how do you usually structure it?
No, do you know what? It was for a while, and then in the last maybe 3 years, we've just introduced, because all the fans were saying, well, why can't we hear some more of the duo stuff, not just stuff we did in the early 80s? So now it's sort of half and half, and people were always going to want to hear the massive hits. But Karen and I have made more albums as a duo now than as a trio. Bizarrely, Siobhan was only in the group for 6 years, which seems crazy, but that was, quite a short period of time, and the group has been going now 36 years. So, we've a lot of material to cover, and we've started introducing more and more, and we're gigging at the moment. Just did 2 shows at the weekend, big festivals, and we do half and half. So there's new stuff from the new album, there's stuff from the 2000s and the 90s, and then we've got obviously the hits. So we've got a good repertoire there.
And that is longevity. I believe you just said 36 years, that very, very few bands reach, especially at your level. And I'm curious, as somebody who had these top level hits for a long time, and then you had a period where obviously it's no longer cool to be Bananarama, and then it's suddenly cool to be Bananarama again, and it's just nothing but hits when you play live. I'm curious when you realized that this was going to be a long-term career, regardless of whether or not you were going to have top 40 hits.
Yes, well, strangely, I mean, I was 18 when I started, so when we had the hits, and we worked with the Fun Boy 3, and we were on top of the pops, and we didn't really care if it happened, it was a long career or it wasn't. But the longer it went on, and especially once we had Cool Summer, the top 10 in the States, it was very much like, wow, we can reach out all over the world. And for a long time, the hits kept coming. And then when it first doesn't, you have a song that isn't a hit, it's like, oh, what's happened here? What's going on? Because you do imagine it will go on forever. And you put out an album, it's not as successful as the, ones before. But I watched, interestingly, a Duran Duran documentary recently, and Simon was saying how, when they first had not a big hit with an album, they were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Then they tried another album, it was not as successful, and they thought, well, okay. And then by the third one, they just thought, you know what, I'm going to make the music I want to make, work with who I want to work with. We've got a fan base. If people want to buy it, they're going to buy it. So it's not that competition to get in the charts. And why would it be? How can you sort of compete with Taylor Swift or, all the youngsters out there? It's not really about that competition anymore. I think it's about a love of music. So either you love it or you're doing it for fame. And I have to say, Karen and I have never really been into the fame side of it at all.
Outside of Bananarama, Is there a professional aspiration or series of aspirations for you? Do you have other projects that you pursue, or is it really there's Bananarama and then there's life outside the group?
Do you know, it's so weird. This is all I've done since I left school, and it is almost like I don't know how to do anything else. We've done kind of like TV things and cameo, like acting things, but I absolutely love writing music, and it's what I love, and I feel really lucky that I'm able to have done it for so long. Obviously, we have kids, and we have a life outside of it, but just love music and love touring. I think because we didn't tour until 1989, and Siobhan had left, so Jackie joined for a couple of years, Jackie O'Sullivan. We did a big world tour, absolutely loved it, and now we've got our own band, and we've been touring for the last sort of 10, 15 years, and that's really what we love doing. So, and then having the album out as well and touring with that album, it was just the icing on the cake. And we got to play Glastonbury last week, so that was just amazing.
And outside of the UK and US, pardon my ignorance, but what are some of the territories where you've gotten to tour a lot over the years, or at least have a big following?
Definitely Asia. We're about to go to Japan in August, and we're playing festivals called Summer Sonic. Summer Sonic. They're like 50,000. They have like the Foo Fighters and all kinds of different acts. So it's great to have all a whole different genre of music there. Not 80s stuff. It's just loads of different artists from all different eras and current, older ones, whatever. But it's really looking forward to that. So yeah, Asia definitely, France, Germany.
Yeah, Summer Sonic is a massive festival in Japan. I believe it's a 2-day festival and all that. Yeah. And that brings to mind the question that I often have when artists have fame in Japan is, were your hits in the UK and the US the same hits in Japan, or is it different albums charted differently?
Pretty much all of the 80s stuff was a hit in Japan. And then Karen and I used to go out there with other albums, I think with Pop Life and maybe even Ultraviolet, which wasn't even particularly successful, wasn't released in the UK. But yes, it's strange what we worked with a Japanese artist out there, and he remixed a track, and so that gives you a sort of inroad into their culture. But they basically are, I don't know, 80-90% domestic kind of music. So it was great when we broke through, is that sort of 10% from outside of Japan.
And then looking ahead that you have this new album that's out this month, your first in 10 years, do you know what 2 years from now for your career looks like, or do things really go, 1-2 months at a time?
Pretty much. We've signed with CAA, with AEG as promoters, and they're really into us touring again. And bizarrely, Karen and I want to make another album. It's just like, this has gone so well and we've enjoyed it so much. We just think, I don't think you can put a time limit on something or an age limit. It's just for as long as we want to do it, and as long as people want to buy it, we'll probably make music. I never thought I'd say that at 18, but there you go.
Well, yeah, I saw that your recent quote, or at least it was a couple of years ago, where you said that age doesn't bother you because you're not trying to be teenagers. So clearly you're a group that is going to have longevity if you're not trying to keep up. So I guess in closing, any last words for the kids?
I would always say you've got to stick with your gut instinct and make the music you want to make, and don't be swayed by, look, if you wear this or if you sing this, you'll be... it doesn't last. It has to come from yourself. It really does.
Great. Thank you. You gave me so much to work with, and really hope to see you in New York in the near future.
Oh, thank you, Darren. Thank you very much.
Last but not least is my interview with Scott Stapp. Odds are that you first learned about Scott through his work with Creed, yet his solo career has been going on for longer than his Creed tenure did. Scott's new album is called The Space Between the Shadows, and it was released the day after I spoke with Scott by phone. I had the chance to learn more about the space between the shadows, while Scott also opened up about his surprising hobby outside of music and family.
Hey, Darren. This is Scott Stapp calling for an interview.
Hey, how's it going there, Scott?
Good, man. How you doing?
I am doing great today. Excited to be talking to you, and I know that your new album comes out tomorrow. How long did you spend making this album? Because you already have 4 singles released from it.
I think if you added up the time spent in the studio and actually writing, it was probably about weeks writing and recording, and then we went to mix and mastering. But I had 5 years worth of ideas and thoughts and notes and just a lot of life lived to draw from. So, but actual, like I said, getting into the studio and finalizing the songs and recording them and everything, 8 weeks.
And do you know which song that you wrote first, or at least recorded first?
Yeah, the first song I wrote, it didn't make the record. It's called "Where Are You Now?" But that song led to "World I Used to Know."
Did you record a lot more than you actually put on the album?
Not really. Maybe 3 or 4 additional songs, which isn't too much. But we included 2 B-sides on the digital download as well as the album and the vinyl. But in addition to that, maybe 3 or 4 other songs.
And when you decide to make a solo album, did you already have the label attached, or did you make it and then start shopping for record labels?
It's funny how that situation worked. We were, prior to making the record, about to close a deal with another label, aside from Napalm. We began speaking with them and met with them and just felt like it was a better fit, and we'd get more personal attention than the big major label. And it kind of reminded me of the scenario with Creed with Wind Up years ago. And I saw how beneficial that was to be with a smaller label and the personal attention that you get. And so it was probably at the same time, it was actually, the contract was actually finished, but deals were happening prior to the music being done.
And between this and your last album, you had done some recording and writing with the band Art of Anarchy. Is that one still active, or is that just a one-off for you?
That is a one-off for me at this point.
Got it. Do you have other one-offs that you like to do, or is really the focus on the whole Scott Stapp solo career?
Right now, the main focus and the sole focus is on my solo career and this new record, and I can't wait to share it with the world.
Now, when somebody's going to be seeing you live on the upcoming tour, do you mostly play songs from the new album, or is it a mix of things from throughout your career?
I'll be playing probably 8 songs off the new record, maybe a couple other songs off previous solo records, and then maybe 6 Creed songs. It goes through my entire catalog, but with more of a focus on this new record. But I still, play my Creed material as well.
As somebody who sold countless millions of records with Creed, is it still thrilling for you to make an album? Because a lot of artists at a certain point go, I like playing the songs live, I don't like being in the studio.
I love being in the studio. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't love every aspect of it. And so I love being in the studio, love making new music, love performing live. And so, I'm fortunate that I'm still passionate about all of it.
And are you the sort of artist that's writing every day or frequently, even if there isn't an album to make?
I wouldn't say every day, but as inspiration hits, I'll jot down ideas or record something into my phone or, into a program on my computer along the way if I feel it's worthwhile. But, I found over the last, I would say 7 or 8 years that what I end up using from that are bits and pieces. But I'm always in a creative state. When something hits me, I definitely, document it.
When you're writing music or writing songs in general, is it that you just have the vocal line, or do you actually sit down with an instrument and start playing and sing over it?
It comes in both forms. Sometimes it comes with me and an acoustic guitar first, and other time it can come with a lyric or just a vocal melody. So it comes in both ways.
Do you also play piano besides guitar?
I play well enough on guitar and piano to write, but I'm not by any means a virtuoso or a lead. I just know them well enough to use them as tools for writing.
And has it always been that case? Because the classic kind of thing is that when you see the front man who doesn't have the guitar for pretty much the whole show, and then one song they pick up the guitar to show that they can play guitar in front of the crowd.
Right. Yeah, and that's the way I've been, since back in the day. I'm sure you can find online pictures of me playing in the arenas during the Creed days. But that's pretty much how it is with me now.
You mentioned having a few songs left over that, you started recording or in different states that aren't on the album. Those are going to be international bonus tracks, or you'll just wait to see if there's a soundtrack, or what's the deal?
Not at this point. We'll see what happens down the road, but right now they're not slated for any kind of, release or anything like that. But who knows? Who knows? Because I really like a couple of them.
And I must say that the production on your album is very modern sounding, very heavy, very well mixed. How did you wind up with your producer on this record?
Well, actually, it's co-produced by Marty Fredrickson and Scott Stevens, both of which I've been writing songs with and are friends of mine for a long, long time. And so, I called them and we decided to take it to the next level. And they know me very well and we're friends. And so I really felt like I would get honest, direct feedback, and also they would push me. And that's exactly what happened.
And then away from the music, you're one of those people that people pretty much just know for the music. Do you have any hobbies or any things that a lot of your time goes into besides music and family?
Aside from music and family, I get some rounds of golf in every now and then. I know you mentioned family, but I do coach my son a lot in his baseball, football, and basketball, and that's pretty much it, man. Family and music and some golf here and there.
I find that more people from hard rock are into golf than not, and it's a very surprising thing. Like, for example, everyone knows about Alice Cooper and they know about Judas Priest, but the band Dirty Heads, they're big golfers, and a lot of people from their local punk scene are into golf. Do you golf at just a local country club, or do you golf with other musicians?
Both. I've golfed for years and years, and would find courses on tour to play at, and when I first started playing, I was a member of a local country club near my home. And so, wherever I can, and I enjoy playing in charity tournaments, and that's where I get to play with other artists and musicians and athletes.
And when you golf, do you wear the traditional garb, or do you have your own version of golf fashion?
I mean, I think everyone has their own, personality, but I stated traditional golf swag.
And then looking ahead at everything, you said before that your solo career is really your focus. Is that what you want to be doing the rest of your life, be a solo artist and be touring? Or is there, a passion that we don't know about? Do you want to write movies? Do you want to have your own podcast?
Right now, my passion is focused on writing music. So whether that be for me or for another artist or, with my old band, who knows? But right now, my focus is writing music.
And then looking back at everything, from having sold so many records, is there a professional accomplishment that you're most proud of at this point?
Oh, wow, man. I tell you, there's been a lot that I'm very proud of and humbled by. But I think, it would be the Grammy, if I had to pick one. That was such a prestigious and just an accomplishment I never thought that I would achieve.
Well, I've heard mixed things on that. I've heard people say that the Grammy is the proudest accomplishment, and other people say that they don't really need a Grammy to feel validated as an artist. Have you always felt so strongly about the Grammy?
Well, one thing about that is it's voted on by your peers, and so that means a lot to me when your peers give you that nod. The other awards that I really hold dear to me are the Billboard Awards, because those are voted on by the fans. And so in both of those scenarios, there's no politics or who involved. And so, no, I've never felt that way.
And then in terms of peers, are there other artists that you look at that maybe you came up with or you toured with where you go, that's my group. Those are the people that I want to be associated with?
Man, that's a good question. There's so many, man. Just the rock community. I would say the rock community in general that was around and that came up at the same time as me, without singling out anybody.
That question comes from the idea that, unfortunately, people lump in Nirvana and Pearl Jam together because they were both Seattle-related and they had hits around the same time. And so you, of course, came up with Creed, and then the hits have continued and the success has continued. So is there a particular artist that you look at the career of and you go, that's what I want?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be U2.
All that said, Scott, any last words for the kids?
Oh, man, just hope you enjoy the music and just spread love.
Thanks for listening to the Paltrocast with Darren Paltrowitz on the Pure Grain Audio Network. More information on the Paltrocast can be found online at www.puregrainaudio.com. Until next time, have a great Shabbos.